Infinity War is almost upon us. We made it through the bad, the boring, the mediocre, the semi-good, and the kinda great. But today, we tackle my top 10 entries in the MCU. Fandom, to me! Let's get started. After Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, I was getting afraid that the newer Marvel movies just wouldn't be as good as the first two phases. Thank you, Thor Ragnarok, for proving me wrong. Ragnarok is something of a course correction for the Thor brand, throwing out everything the fans complained about and bridging the gap between our human-like hero and the abstract antics of the Guardians movies. It's a lot more like Guardians than Thor, actually. These aren't demigods, they're straight-up aliens. Jane Foster is dumped from the plot in a throwaway line, and the story quickly disposes of many side characters that were hanging around in Asgard. That point is bittersweet for me, actually. I really like the Warriors 3, but I guess with such little development it's hard to see them sticking out the series past this point anyway. Still, this movie kills off series veterans with no freaking remorse. Also, where the hell is Sif? Apparently her actress just couldn't make it due to scheduling. I hope that means Sif is still alive somewhere. What we're left with is the good stuff. Thor, Loki, Heimdall, newcomer Valkyrie, and is that the Hulk? Hey buddy! Yeah, the writers care so little about the Thor comics at this point, most of the movie is the plot of Planet Hulk, hosted by an ancient alien Jeff Goldblum who doesn't give a crap about anything. It's great. The story moves at a swift clip, constantly swiping through interesting new stuff. We start by introducing Surtur, the giant fire demon, then here's Anthony Hopkins playing Loki, then Doctor Strange making the exact kind of cameo I've always wanted from him. Then we meet Hela, one of the franchise's best villains, who's so charismatic we can just be watching her bum around the castle and be entertained. And what the hell, let's end things off with a spaceship piloted by the Incredible Hulk, with a Valkyrie firing cannons at a skeleton army and a giant wolf on a rainbow bridge. Yes, all of this, yes. It might seem like it's going overboard, but unlike Age of Ultron, each of these characters and set pieces have a moment to set in, say their piece, and leave. It never felt like they were moving on too soon to me. It helps that starting from the end of the first act, we know we're going to have a big fight in Asgard. So the whole second act, we know we're trying to get back there. It's not as aimless as Ultron, where we never knew what the hell was going on. The humor, once again, won't be everybody's Stein of Mead, but if you're ready for a big stupid space ride, you'll get it. Alternatively, you can watch this movie like an analytic smarty pants, like I do, and still be pleased. There's a lot to unpack here with Thor and Hela's parallel goals of recapturing the past, juxtaposed with Valkyrie, Hulk, and Loki, all trying to escape their past in one way or another. Yeah, this writing is actually really smart if you want to talk about it sometime, but for your first viewing, I suggest just turning your brain off and taking it in. Listen to that 170s song for the second time and have a good romp saving Asgard, or destroying it, whichever. You may have noticed a distinctive lack of Captain America in the first two parts. That's because as a trilogy, the Cap movies are about as flawless as you can get for action movies. Thor is still my favorite Avenger, but Cap is a close second, and his mini-franchise is probably the best. Even its sophomore slump is on par with the best of other heroes. Case in point, Winter Soldier. Actually, depending on who you ask, Winter Soldier might be the best Marvel movie. For me, it's a solid number 9. After Avengers, Iron Man could go back to Malibu and Thor could go back to Asgard, but Cap couldn't go back to the 1940s. His story was forced to evolve. Steve remains one of the most lovable by-the-books authority nerds, coming from a time period when the US was an absolute good fighting an absolute evil. Advancing him as a modern-day operative of S.H.I.E.L.D., Cap has to deal with the shades of grey in this high-tech political thriller. It's old school versus new school, while Cap decides if S.H.I.E.L.D. is really something he wants to be a part of. The action scenes are tight, and the fact that none of the characters are bulletproof adds a sense of risk not as prevalent in Iron Man or Thor. Another all-star cast. The writers smartly stuck Black Widow in here in her best appearance yet, making a great chaotic good foil to Cap's lawful good. Sam Wilson is so likable, they can throw in the Falcon armor with barely any build-up, and it's surprisingly not that weird. I think that's proof that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is working. We'll accept just about anything at this point. And after how many appearances he's had in the series, seeing Samuel Jackson finally use his acting chops is a breath of fresh air, adding welcome dimensionality to Nick Fury. If Fury had never appeared in another movie after this, it would have been an excellent send-off, as the movie universe transitions out of its need for the S.H.I.E.L.D. framing device. Speaking of which, the way this movie so casually flips the table on the continuity of the whole MCU, that was a pretty ballsy plot twist, I gotta say. Hail Hydra indeed! And if you like the first Captain America movie, which, spoilers, I did, there's some heartbreaking callbacks. Many of these movies make solid blockbusters, but this one's pure vibranium. Aw yeah, Luke Cage! All hail the MVP of the Defenders, Mike Colter. Newer Marvel fans might not believe it, but Luke Cage has existed for about 50 years, and no one really gave a crap about the character until this show came out. Yeah, now he's the go-to black hero of Marvel, at least until a certain other movie came out. But I don't think it was until his appearance in Jessica Jones that we realized how great he is. I could rank this show number 8 for the main character alone. Colter shaves off some of the more problematic stereotypes of the old character to give us this strong, stoic, slightly cocky, no-sense teddy bear. They managed to match the powers to the personality. Very defensive. He'd be just fine if you left him alone, but you mess around in his cave and he goes grizzly. The showcases of his powers are simple, but effective. I think Luke Cage had an easier time with a TV show budget than Iron Fist did. Shots like this make him feel unmovable, and who needs a costume when you have that emblematic bullet hole riddled hoodie? But there's more to like here than Coulter alone. We get an unapologetically black cast of strong and interesting characters, and while we get into issues of racism and class disparity, it's handled in such a way that even the most flippant bigots have trouble getting offended by it. I love the repeating locale of Cottonmouth's nightclub, all the different artists we see, and just the soundtrack in general. It's a celebration of centuries of Black America. At least, I think it does a good job. I'm not really the best person to ask. And the story is just plain compelling. For, like, the first half. If there's any letdown in the show, it's the season's less than thrilling conclusion. Cottonmouth was a really interesting villain. You can see them setting him up similar to Wilson Fisk. Then, there's a plot twist that, I have to admit, is pretty great. But after that we get a bait-and-switch villain we haven't really grown attached to. Though not for lack of trying. In this punch-out in the middle of Harlem with a crowd of supporters yelling, "You can do it, Luke!" It's not the worst thing in the world, but I couldn't help but think, is this really all this season was building up to? Maybe I'll feel better about it when Season 2 can pick up the ball. We still have a pair of great villains left over. Clearly they're saving them. As a finale it left me wanting, but maybe when it's not the last of Luke Cage it'll feel better. I don't know how you stop Luke Cage, and I hope we don't find out anytime soon. He's simply the coolest. You feel that wave of hype? That's Black Panther. It's my hope that someday we can have black leads in superhero movies without it feeling like a big deal. But for now, the build-up to this movie was incredible. As far as outside hype goes, I would rate this only second to the original Avengers. But judging the movie by its own merits, it's still stunning. Hulk is a monster movie, Ant-Man is a heist. But have we ever seen a big-budget film looking like this? I think not. This movie could have been called Wakanda because the visuals and world building are the real star this time around. Not to say anything about Chadwick Boseman, who makes the perfect T'Challa, but we already knew that from Civil War. What we didn't know is how many other stars would be born out of this. Okoye, stone cold badass. M'Baku, hilarious and memorable. Shuri, best character ever. I can't wait for Tony Stark to meet her and find out he's the world's second greatest inventor. And Eric Killmonger, possibly one of the best villains in the MCU. Oh yeah, funny thing, that MCU. I mentioned before how Ant-Man lost its original director because he was unhappy compromising his vision to shoehorn in Marvel continuity. In this case though, Ryan Coogler was granted freedom to do pretty much whatever he wanted. References to other films are kept to a minimum. Now I'm such an excitable dork, I love the references, but honestly, this film is stronger without them. It's a good thing that the movie feels like its own thing. You can totally do sequels, and I'm sure they will, but I didn't feel left hanging for the next installment like I did with Ant-Man or Thor 2. It didn't have to force a reveal of the last Infinity Stone or anything. Though calling it now the Soul Stone is totally in the vibranium mines, that's what affects the soil so that the heart-shaped fruit takes you to the spirit world. Tell me I'm wrong, just try it. The movie instead focuses on a struggle between tradition and innovation, outreach versus isolation, compassion versus justice. It's one of those few movies where a hero can look at their villain, see that he's wrong in some ways, but still learn from him. When T'Challa is first coronated, he's not sure what kind of king he wants to be. Through his conflict with Eric, he finds himself as a ruler. That's awesome. And his conflict with Claw, with an excellent performance by Andy Serkis. He's having so much fun. Martin Freeman is also there. That's all I have to say about that. If there's one nitpick I have, it revolves around T'Challa's supposed best friend, W'Kabi. I get why he isn't fully supportive of T'Challa, but it's not really explored and leaves him as a pretty flat character, leading to Eric's arrival when W'Kabi's all like, "You failed to catch Claw, but Eric did," and T'Challa isn't like, "Yeah, we had him in custody, but Eric stole him from us, and in doing so he tried to shoot your lover," but instead says, "Don't question me, I'm king, let's go do the waterfall fight again." It's a distracting instance where everybody gets momentarily stupid so that the plot can happen. Whatever. I was mad for a while, but then W'Kabi unleashed a herd of battle rhinos and I didn't care anymore. This movie is awesome. Don't let anyone dampen your hype. And finally, we get to my favorite Marvel TV show. You know it's gotta be Jessica Jones. Not because it's a trailblazing feminist manifesto, which it is and I appreciate, but because it's just a great show full of character growth, subtext, and all that stuff I adore. What can I say? I love when shows make me feel depressed. It makes me feel less depressed later when I have to do real life stuff. Jessica tried the whole hero thing, it really didn't work out for her, but now she's an incredible yet miserable private investigator. Plenty of people were turned off by the show's early episodes, and I heard the reasoning that the main character was too nasty and pessimistic. I won't lie to you, this is a gritty show and it's not for everyone. but I kind of feel like some of those people would have been more accepting if we had a male hero with the same exact character traits. Like, Tony Stark is kind of a rude, snarky alcoholic sometimes, but it's charming. When Jessica acts that way, she's violating an arcane, unwritten law of gender roles. Whatever. I'm not saying the only reason you would hate this show is because you're sexist, just think about it. Like I said, not for everybody, but definitely for me. There's a balance to Jessica's misery. We start off with her as the victim, recovering from the reign of a villain played deliciously by David Tennant. But she's also incredibly flawed, in some ways because of her dark past, and in other ways because she's just always been an abrasive person. How much are we going to blame her crappy life on her, and how much on circumstance or other people? There's a lot of great third-wave feminist theory in here if you want it, which it will subvert just as often as embrace. And that villain, so good. He's so incredibly despicable that when they start humanizing him with his own backstory, you naturally retch at the thought of him not being pure evil. A self-victimizing, petulant child and a horrendous monster that, like his victims, you won't be able to help but fall in love with. And the lighting of this show plays so well with that mix of levity and fear. Sorry, I get a little artsy whenever I watch this show, but if that's the kind of thing you're into, it's a masterfully executed series. I could talk about this show forever. Which is why I'm gonna keep talking about it. Season 2 is the most recent piece of media on this list, and for me is probably tied with Season 1 in terms of quality. Maybe I like Season 1 a tiny bit more for that extra dose of Tennant, but I decided to rank them like this for the sake of discussing the seasons sequentially. I think the spot is warranted. Perhaps Season 1 has the more exciting arc of Jessica confronting and defeating her oppressor. Season 2 is more passive in nature. With her greatest threat overcome, Jessica needs to regrow her life, recover from her wounds, and figure out what kind of person she wants to be, lest she be defined by her past suffering. If she gives in, then she really is Kilgrave's slave. We still have a driving conflict, but for a while the focus of the show is just the set of characters trying to find meaning in their lives. Jessica, Trish, Malcolm, and especially Hogarth, whose life might not be much longer anyway. It's funny to me that this show makes no reference to the Defenders, because frankly the plot doesn't need it. This show is so tight on its own. So often while watching this, Allie and I stopped to appreciate that an entire scene was made up of interesting, diverse women. Guys, I have no complaints. There's not really a central villain to blame everything on in the end this time around, so if that's something you need, it's not something you're gonna get. You're going to get a revolutionary, unyieldingly powerful show instead. Sorry to disappoint. This movie could have sucked so bad. Heck, I've seen the version of this movie that sucks so bad. But when the world needed him most, Captain America pulled through to remind cinema what a hero looks like. Before this movie, a lot of people rolled their eyes at the idea of a superhero named Captain America. Some people still do. They hear the name and expect some rock-headed blind patriot who does nothing but sing the praises of the land of the free. More like the parodies of him than the actual character. Never mind that in the comics, Cap is usually the first person to jump ship on America whenever he thinks they're doing something wrong. A lot of directors would have taken a more cynical approach when bringing this character to life. That's what they did with Superman, subverting and expanding him by making him a selfish, broody edgelord instead of, you know, Superman. Setting this movie in the 40s, Marvel made what must have seemed at the time like a gamble, to play Captain America, perfect human being, completely straight. Contrary to popular expectation, this did not make him a flat cutout of propaganda. The film even had a hilarious montage of him trying to be exactly that. Instead, it made him a three-dimensional, heartfelt refresher of a time when we used to look up to our superheroes. Don't get me wrong, this is the most eagle-soaring American movie you've ever seen. When he marches back to camp with all those rescued POWs, F yeah, America! But it's more that he embodies that American spirit, that need for justice that us countrymen all think we have, one removed from any petty parties or politics. Brilliant example, when he's asked if he wants to kill Nazis, he says that he doesn't in particular, he just doesn't like bullies. It's a rare example of a movie where the main character starts off knowing everything he needs to. It's only the muscles and the shield he needs to get before he can save the day. Instead of watching to see if Steve can learn from his mistakes, we're watching to see if a small beam of good can persevere against an army of evil. And when something cheesy happens, it's the sweetest cheese you'll ever taste. Because that cheese is sincere. That is sincere cheese. There's only about 2 seconds of this movie I don't like, and that's because of an awkward cut in an action scene. That's how nitpicky I have to be to criticize this movie. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this movie is perfect. I know it's not, but it totally is. Captain America is my favorite when it comes to solo hero movies, but I'm always going to lean towards the team-ups, where you can rally together a bunch of weirdos and see how they mingle while saving the planet. While the sequel does more in the way of exploring its characters, it's hard to top the pure fun produced by Guardians of the Galaxy. No one had heard of these characters before. I mean, I did. Sure, let's take an angry wrestler, a green assassin, a tree, a raccoon, and an 80s Chris Pratt, and throw them into a sprawling space opera. It's one of my favorite examples of a party movie. Party in this context meaning a Dungeons & Dragons party. It's the perfect 5-man band. Hero, Lancer, Big Guy, Guy with a Plan, and the heart of the group. They have to meet each other, work on their respective character flaws, and get the thing to the guy before the bad guy uses it to do the bad thing. There's a dragon, a big bad, and a bigger bad so big we don't even get to meet him yet. If you're into comic references and want to pick up hints into continuity, there's plenty here for you. But you know who doesn't care about all that? The main characters, who so irrelevantly ignore the larger plot. It's hilarious. It's got a lot of feels too, the kind of feels you only get when you've been having a great time. I said this before, it is ludicrous how sympathetic Rocket is. This movie can be kind of random at times. Actually, no it isn't. This story is 100% character driven. Everyone has a goal or desire, and the events are cause and effect based on character choices. Part of you is along for the ride, constantly surprised by what happens. The other half of you kind of saw everything coming because the characters have been so well conveyed and you can predict their reactions. The result? Something happens and you yell, "Yeah! Woo!" Or maybe that's just me. Did I mention that this movie has, like, the best soundtrack of all time? You know how all these action movies are trying to do the greatest hits jukebox thing now? Well, Guardians is the one to blame for that. Thanks, Guardians. You inadvertently made Suicide Squad even more horrible. The difference is, Guardians of the Galaxy has a reason for this music to be in here, and generally understands the kind of tone that it wants. If there was still any doubt that the MCU was working as a franchise, this movie proves that it does. We just sold a movie with a talking raccoon and a tree. Come at me, DC. Is there even a point to explaining why The Avengers is great? Well, I've written 23 pages so far, so I might as well. If you don't like The Avengers, you just don't like superhero movies. Or you're a DC-only kind of person. Hey, more power to you. Avengers has become the go-to superhero film, to the point it's easy to forget how good it really is. It's not just that it stuck the landing on Marvel Studios' 3-year crossover experiment, or that it's a reward for those who followed the movies this far, though both of those things are true. This movie is engineered to be an all-time summer blockbuster. I've denounced Batman v Superman and Justice League for trying to do the big universe crossover without putting in the work that Marvel did. I stand by that, but I'm convinced that Avengers would have been a hit even without the 5 movies that came before it. This is how good Marvel is at writing and directing its movies. If you've seen Iron Man 1 and 2, Hulk, Thor, and Captain America, you're rewarded with the extra background and context. You recognize these characters immediately, and get to enjoy how true to form they are to their first appearances. But if you just walked in and The Avengers is your first movie, it's actually telling you everything you need to know about these characters to begin with. A scary guy named Loki shows up. Thor is his brother. Nick Fury knows a lot of strong people. Hawkeye is a good guy, but he's being controlled. Natasha is cleverly manipulative. Don't get Bruce mad. Tony is bad with authority, but actually did his homework. Cap is being reintegrated into society and doesn't get most references, and Coulson is a big nerd. Through the first third of the movie, it's meticulously informing you, and fitting it in so naturally thanks to Joss Whedon's amazing ability to write dialogue. Whedon's never developing less than 2 characters in any given scene. The characters develop one another. That's why Bruce meeting Tony is so great. Not because Iron Man is meeting the Hulk, but because Tony and Bruce make such good bros. Any combination of these characters is a goldmine. Not just that, the powers are explained. It's a well-known rule that before the heroes can team up, they have to fight. But during this confrontation between Thor, Iron Man, and Cap, we're learning the mechanics and limitations of their powers. Thor is physically stronger than Iron Man's suit, but Iron Man's got all these gadgets and can absorb power, and Cap's shield is stronger than Thor's hammer. Later we see that Hulk is stronger than Thor, but still can't lift Thor's hammer, which is great because my friends and I were having an argument about that when we were in line for this movie. I won. You ever notice that all the hero-on-hero fights in Marvel movies are inconclusive? Either they end early, or some circumstance makes it less than a fair one-on-one. This way, whoever your favorite is, they're never proven weaker than the other heroes. The sacred who will win debate stays alive. I also want to steal from one of my favorite critics on the subject, Bob Chipman, who points out that there's a metatextual brilliance to the whole story. Pushing this plot is the need for the Avengers to assemble. The bad guys, like Loki, the Shadowy War Council, they all think the Avengers will never work as a team. You want to prove them wrong. You want the Avengers to assemble. The same way Marvel wants these movie licenses to assemble after 3 years of groundwork. And when they do, and we see this revolving lineup shot, it's one of the most victorious feelings in film history. The Eagle has landed, the Avengers have assembled, and now we're going to celebrate with 30 minutes of the best teamwork fighting you've ever seen. Marvel fights aren't just spectacle either. Not the good ones anyway. Every attack is character driven. They say something about the person throwing the punch, how smart they are, how brave they are, or most often, how far they've come in embracing this new team. A lot of aliens died to the power of friendship, I'll tell you that. Is it the best movie in the franchise? Well, it's only my number 2. But nothing will ever beat seeing this movie with my college friends in theaters opening night. A packed room of people laughing or cheering every chance they got, and there are plenty of opportunities. When Cap says, "There's only one God, ma'am," and he doesn't dress like that, the whole theater claps. That's exactly the kind of hokey thing Cap would say. Guys, I love this movie so much. But we got one more. Process of elimination. Do you know which one's missing? Well, here it is. Number 1. Let me be honest. Captain America Civil War is not the best movie in the series. The inclusion of so many Marvel characters is excessive and pandering, and the plot is a little too complex to follow unless you're a fan. But you know what? I am a fan, and I like being pandered to. Civil War is one of my favorite movies of all time. Common hollow complaint. Why is it called Captain America Civil War? It should just be an Avengers movie since most of the characters are here anyway. Yes, you're very funny. It's called Captain America because it's his story, and a direct continuation of his mission to find Bucky after Captain America Winter Soldier. It's not given the size and scope that they reserve for Avengers movies. But after Age of Ultron, with Thor and Hulk hopping around in space, and Iron Man no longer getting his own movies, it also falls on Captain America movies to show the status quo of the Avengers here on Earth after the destruction of Sokovia. We now have a Registration Act inhibiting the rights of superpowered people, but it's for the protection and security of the people, so that the Avengers can't just hop across sovereign borders and cause destruction whenever they want to. It's a multifaceted issue, handled much better than the comic event of the same name if you want my opinion. Here, our representatives of both sides, Cap and Iron Man, are both right and both wrong, and we're left to consider how we would vote in this hypothetical situation. Naturally, it calls in a bunch of heroes because it concerns every superpowered person on Earth. There's a villain up to no good, and just as Cap feared, the Sokovia Accords keep him from saving the day, meaning he has to rally whoever he can to his side while Tony does the same. And the result is a gratuitous ode to joy of superheroes, using their powers in creative ways, with all the jubilation and wonder of your favorite comic book brought to life. And to be honest, those 2 complaints that I gave at the beginning, I don't really agree with them. I don't think the plot is too complicated, or at least it boils down to a very simple struggle between Iron Man and Cap. If that's all you can follow, that's still the only essential crux of the movie. Though if you're paying attention, it's really not that hard to get everyone else's motivations. And the crossovers? Guys, this is why we have a cinematic universe. It's not like you need to see all the other movies, though. This is the way comic book events are supposed to work. I like Captain America, and I like Iron Man. I'll give this a watch. Oh, that was great. And I really like that one guy. What was his name? Ant-Man? I never saw his movie. Maybe I'll check it out. Though from where I'm standing, everyone in this fight is awesome. Somehow, this movie has a larger main cast than Ultron, but does way better at giving everyone their time in the sun. Can I just go character by character? Humor me for a second here. Ant-Man is maybe the most forced inclusion, but he's much needed levity in this big brawl, and Paul Rudd is a national treasure. First appearance of Spider-Man, and I love this new take on him. He's just so happy to be here. First appearance of Black Panther. When I first realized that this was T'Challa, I lost my mind. He's so perfect. And they made him really intimidating. Can we all agree that Hawkeye has never been cooler? Say what you will about the reveal of his family in Ultron, he's finally got his own defined character now. War Machine also, expendable as he is, finally has some more unique tools that makes him feel like more than just the backup Iron Man. Black Widow, great as always. It's kind of heartbreaking watching her support Iron Man when she's developed such a friendship with Cap. I like how Bucky is the only one using regular guns, and how he and Falcon spend this movie fighting to be Steve's best bro. Speaking of Falcon, his toolset is cooler than ever, and the guy is hilarious. Vision, Scarlet Witch, this movie almost makes Age of Ultron retroactively better, since it takes the time to characterize these two and explain what the heck they can do. This leaves Steve and Tony. Oh, I love them both so much. Tony externalizing his fears and guilt continue to be the driving force of the series, but I can totally see where he's coming from supporting these acts. It's gonna happen anyway, he might as well hop on board and try and make things easier for his friends. Plus, after building Ultron, he's not so sure the Avengers is such a good idea anymore. I love that continuity fix too, where he talks about how he tried to quit being Iron Man but couldn't because he just doesn't want to. He's too smart for his own good, he just has to be in control. As for Cap, I ultimately agree with his side of the argument, but this movie also does what his other movies didn't. Implies that Captain America might actually have character flaws. It's true, Cap always stands for freedom and can't ignore a cry for help. But behind that there is a certain arrogance. He's unable to compromise his morals, and Tony calls him out on that. I love this exchange. Cap says he sometimes wishes that he can stop doing the right thing. Tony says, no you don't, and Cap just smiles and agrees. Tony's got your number, man. Certain armchair critics have cast down this movie on a single point. This shot used for the trailers. Hilarious, they say. It's supposed to be the shot that defines the movie, but it's just 12 idiots running at each other in an empty parking lot. This moment in the movie really only serves to let you catch your breath mid-fight, and see who's on each side before they start up again. And I don't know why the coloring is so bad in these movies. I guess they gave it a dingy palette so that you remember it's on Earth, whereas Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor Ragnarok look like they're on a blacklight poster. But this is not the defining picture of the movie. This is. The airport fight is fun. Loads of fun. It's the big action set piece and one of my favorites in all of film. The heroes aren't really trying to hurt each other. It just gets more and more out of hand when neither side yields, until someone gets hurt and we have real consequences to this civil war. But the big shot, the defining fight, is Cap versus Iron Man at the very end. Iron Man just found out that Bucky killed his parents, there's no more reasoning, he wants Bucky dead, and when Cap won't let that happen, the gloves are off. They are trying to kill each other. All of the history of these two characters, from the first Avengers movie and even before, comes to a head. Even a heartbreaking callback to the first Captain America movie is in there. Yeah, the villain of the movie, Zemo, is kind of a low point, but that's because the schism between these two was already drawn. It just needed a little nudge, even if that nudge required Zemo to be the most ridiculous chess master in movie history. Seriously, how did he pull this off? This is what DC couldn't accomplish with Batman v Superman, and this is why the MCU's years of character development continue to serve it. Because these aren't just the two biggest heroes duking it out, these are good friends falling apart. And there's a good second when, I swear to God, I actually thought Cap was gonna kill Tony with that shield. Civil War, to me, is the thesis of why I got invested in this universe in the first place. Tons of memorable characters, great staging and choreography, and year-spanning development that allows for side-splitting comedy or heartbreaking drama. If Infinity War can achieve the same level of payoff, we have a pretty good finale on our hands. So what comes next? Infinity War is the beginning of the end. After that we get Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain Marvel, and the as-of-yet untitled Avengers 4 that will be the real conclusion to the first decade of MCU properties. Not to mention there's more shows coming to Netflix, Hulu, Freeform, and just plain old TV. Will this whole Marvel thing ever get old? Probably, if they don't keep innovating. But for now, I want as much of this as I can get, even the garbage parts of it. So everybody, thank you for sticking it out with me. I had a lot of passion to get off my chest, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, maybe hit that subscribe button, and if you have any questions for me about these movies and shows, comment below or hit me up on my Twitter or Facebook. Seriously, talking about stuff like this is my favorite thing in the world. I will do everything in my power to answer you. So until next time guys, I hope you enjoy Infinity War. This is Comic Foil, signing off.